Should you buy a house in this market or should you wait it out? Prices are still high, interest rates are still high compared to what we saw a couple years ago, and who the heck knows what's going on in the world right now? I'm Caleb Anderson with Soukup Real Estate Services, and today we're going to answer those questions, whether you want to move or not, and try to help you feel a little more secure with making your big decision for your family. So let's go ahead and hop into it and discuss both the opportunities why now is a good time to buy, and why the heck you should not. You should run for the hills and avoid real estate for all intents and purposes. So either way, let's go ahead and hop into this. Again, I'm Caleb Anderson with Soukup Real Estate Services, a realtor, an investor, a property manager. I'm kind of deep into all things real estate, so I'll give you my pros and cons for buying real estate in today's market. The first case for potentially buying in today's market is reduced competition. Those couple of factors I've already mentioned, high prices, crazy political standings, and just economic uncertainty in the world, relatively high interest rates, have a lot of people reeling back. But if you're in the market, that means that you could potentially have less competition. And less competition means that you, as a buyer, have more room for leverage and negotiation with the seller, and hopefully the ball is in your court. Now, that's not to say that there's not perfect homes and scenarios where the market is still really hot. Here in Fort Collins, Greeley, and Loveland, I've had several buyers where we've pursued properties, and unfortunately, those properties have been in high demand, and we've not been able to secure them. But I've had other properties in the same time frame and area where the property's been on market, and we've been able to negotiate credits or a lower price or have some real leverage when it comes time to an inspection and getting things done. So it's a whole mixed bag right now, but there's a lot of reasons that the reduced competition is good for you as a buyer if you are looking to join the market. Another reason to consider buying today kind of depends on your long-term outlook, but it's a great step towards growing wealth long-term. If you buy a house at $500,000 today and you see 2% appreciation over a 30-year period, which sometimes we see way more, and if the market stalls out, we could see zero or negative growth for a while. But if you see an average of 2% appreciation over a 30-year period, that same home is going to be worth more than $880,000. So we don't want you to miss an opportunity to be a part of some great appreciation if now is a good time for you to get into the market. If you're an investor like myself, another reason to get into the market sooner rather than later is optimistically the principal pay down and the rent increases. Much like the property value should increase historically over time, rents also tend to go up and to the right over time. So that same scenario where you have a rent that is $2,000 a month for your yearly lease over a 30-year period with 2% growth becomes about $3,600 at the end of a 30-year period. So you might get into a house and think you won't cash flow much now, but if you have the fortitude and defense cash to hold on to that property, optimistically you'll see huge rent increases and value increases along with that. Another reason to potentially consider jumping into the market, if it feels right for you today, is you can lock in a house at today's prices with today's negotiating power and all those different incentives. And should interest rates drop, you have the opportunity to refinance at any time. I'm sure you guys have all heard the age-old realtor lingo of marry the house but date the rate. And that's true to some extent. And I'll give you an example. My wife and I bought a house in Greeley about a year and a half ago, maybe 18 months now. And we purchased at the height of the interest rate market. So even with great credit scores and pretty good property history, etc., I think our interest rate was 7.6 or something that just feels asinine. But we did a whole bunch of renovation to this property over the last year and a half, and we actually just refinanced at about 6%. So we got a house that we loved with lower competition, made it our own, and now have greatly reduced our outflow every month by cutting that interest rate from 7.5% or whatever it was to 6%. So it's not always a perfect scenario, and I would still prefer to have 2% versus 6%. But all things equal, that was a great opportunity for us to get into a house, make it our own, and then find a way to make it an affordable option. So could work for a lot of folks. Now, this one doesn't specifically apply to us as much in Fort Collins and or Greeley and or the rest of the surrounding Front Range, but in some markets, it's actually still cheaper to buy a house than it is to rent a house. One that I actually invest in is Sidney, Nebraska, where you can buy a house for $30, it feels, no, I'm just kidding, where you can buy a house for under $100,000 and your rent values are still right around the 1% rule. The difference in some of those markets is they tend to be quote unquote less desirable and see less appreciation, but there are still some markets where you can genuinely buy a house for less than you would pay in rent monthly. So there's opportunities for ownership. I think even if you buy in a market like, let's take Fort Collins, and your mortgage payment might be $2,500, a huge advantage of buying a house today is fixed rate debt. So in the same scenario as previously, you might be able to rent for $2,000 and your mortgage payment might be $2,500. But after you appreciate for 30 years, like we talked about, your rent is no longer $2,000. You're paying $3,600, $3,700 a month. If you have a fixed mortgage, you're only paying $2,500. So it kind of depends what outlook you have. If you have a long-term horizon, buying is typically the better option. I just hinted on it a little bit, but fixed rate debt is an extremely powerful tool, and one that really only here in America do we have a 30-year fixed mortgage option for the most part. So we have some incredible debt, which if you utilize that correctly, you can buy a home with borrowed money for the most part, pay it off over time, and then still be, at the end of the day, the controller of a, let's say, $880,000 property when you've seen appreciation. So no matter what, there's some really cool levers that you can pull and make buying a house have some great long-term benefits for you. All right, this first half of the video has obviously felt pretty dominantly leaned towards buying a home, but I want to make sure that I give an objective opinion about the reasons that right now might not be the best time for you and your family to purchase a home. So let's go ahead and hop into some of the negative pressures against buying a home today. All right now, one reason that deters a lot of potential buyers is that rates are still, not necessarily historically, but compared to recent history, relatively high. We hover in that, as we speak today, 6.25% to 7%, depending on your borrowing power, essentially your worthiness as a borrower. So that still means that when you have a mortgage payment, it's going to feel relatively high in a lot of cases. And so it really does come down to a situation of, can we afford this property as is? Because no matter how cool buying real estate is or buying your own house would be, you have to be able to afford where you live, and you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, put yourself in a tough position, or anything like that. So even though fixed rate debt is a great thing, high interest rates have some ancillary pressures that make it hard for people to want to purchase a home. A couple of these pieces kind of tie in together, but the next real component is that your buying power could be a little reduced. So back in 2019, 2020, we saw historically low interest rates, 2.75, 3%, 3.5%, and those were fantastic buying opportunities for people. And that's why we saw a lot of houses get gobbled up for over asking price with no inspection, waiving your appraisal, and a lot of crazy situations. Fast forward to today, and if interest rates have more than doubled from 3.25% to 6.5% or whatever that ends up being, it can be tough for people both psychologically and financially to want to jump in, because you could buy a lot more house, it felt, for your dollar when those interest rates were lower. So your money may not feel like it stretches as far as it used to. I also think something that is a big detriment to some folks is there are downward pressures in some markets. Take Florida, for example. As a whole, the state in general has been walloped by hurricanes and natural weather events, insurance premium increases, and all of those things have downward pressure on property values. So houses in Florida and some other markets are seeing major decreases and sitting stagnant, etc. And those are reasons that scare a lot of people. So if you've owned a home, or if you were in the market, let's say during the Great Recession, if you've seen big dips in property values, that can be a hurdle that just scares people from re-entering the market. And we want to be cognizant of that. Another reason that right now might not be the best time for you to enter the market is the opportunity cost. If you know that you're going to pay a mortgage of 6 to 7%, and if you have a better way to place your money right now, then again, 2 or 3% annual appreciation or something similar that you may project on a 30-year basis, if you have a better way to go plant your money and make a return, some people are deterred from jumping into real estate. Life is in a lot of ways a number game, and so if you can go trade stocks and make 12% or something similar, sometimes that'll deter folks from putting extra money into a mortgage. They may continue to rent, and then they may invest in a fashion of other ways. And so, yes, buying a home, we feel, is an extremely secure way to grow your wealth, protect the place that you live, protect your costs of living, and a lot of those other functions. But if you're tremendous at what you do in growing your wealth in other ways, maybe buying real estate isn't for you. And we need to understand that if you're great at growing your economic situation on other fronts, maybe that's the best option for you, and maybe that will lead you to home ownership someday. But the best option for you will always be the best option for you. Another reason that you may not want to buy a home today is your lifestyle, because typically buying a house ties you to an area for a greater period of time than renting. Renting a lot of times is a 1-year lease, and so you get 9 months into your lease and decide you don't like the area, or you've got a better opportunity elsewhere. You don't re-sign your lease, and out the door you go and on to the next situation. It doesn't work like that when you buy a home. If you buy a home and decide you want to move a year later, who knows where the market may be, Who knows how much you may have paid off that home? Who knows what your costs to sell or clean or make repairs might be? So if you plan on moving in a pretty quick time frame, homeownership is probably not for you right now. But if you plan on living in a place 5 years, 7 years, any period of time that feels longer than a 1 to 3 intermediate timeline, typically we like to think that the market is forgiving. And so even if there are some ancillary pressures or weird things like that that happen, we tend to think that you'll see still a great property value and that you'll still have had a great opportunity to kind of enjoy those benefits of home ownership instead of having it feel like a burden when you move quickly and you go to the closing table and you actually owe money to get out of your house. So we want to make sure that we really understand moving is not for everyone, especially if you plan on moving frequently. And so if you want to own a home, typically being in that home for a longer period of time will make it a more attractive option. Much on that same note, you don't ever want to feel forced to sell. So let's back it up to 2006, 2007. You might have bought a home straight out of college and felt like you were a bigwig killing it. And then you might have get to 2008, 9, and 10, and between the market collapsing and new opportunities for you elsewhere, you could have felt like you had to sell your home and take a drastic hit. But back to what I was just mentioning, time tends to cure all things in real estate. A fun stat that I point out sometimes is in our entire country's history, including the Great Recession, there's never been a 10-year period of history in our time where property values have decreased. Of course, that's on an average basis. There might be individual pockets. But that means if you bought a house in 2007, by 2017, even if you did see a huge dip in the recession, your property value has already gone up and to the right again. So real estate tends to be forgiving, but you should not buy if you are working with a short time frame or you think you're going to feel pressure to move, because we want to make sure that you feel secure in that decision. Okay, so we have all these pieces of information, good and bad. But how the heck are we going to bring them together and decide what's best for our family? The things that we tend to think are most important are we going to stay in this house for 5+ years? If so, between rent increases, property appreciation, the security that comes with owning your own house, I think it's a great idea to purchase a home. Gives you security, gives you peace of mind, and it gives you stability. So if you're going to be in a house 5, 10, 15 years as the game plan, purchasing a home is probably the right decision for you. The second reason would be, can we comfortably afford this payment? You should never, and I advise this to buyers all the time, never purchase a home if you're going to feel house poor. We don't want you to do something that feels like it's going to be the most exciting adventure of your life, buying your first house, and then all of a sudden you feel like you can't afford it on a month-to-month basis, and you're pinching pennies and just barely scraping by. The whole point of buying a house is to enjoy the lifestyle and the safety and the security it brings. So if you're going to feel extremely tight on a mortgage payment, I would not advise buying a house until you feel like you're in a personally better financial position. And I tend to think that that is removed from the overall market, because you can strengthen your position as a buyer at any point in time. So if you feel comfortable with the payment and outflow of a house, it could be an excellent time to buy, but if not, stay away. The last thing to consider before you buy right now is this not just a house where we're going to see property valuations go up and things like that, but is it the house? Is it conducive to me and my family's lifestyle and needs, location to work? Does it have enough bedrooms, enough yard space? Is this house, because it's supposed to be a place you can call home, is it going to feel like home, or is it going to just feel like a house? And if you're pursuing a house just to have a house, you shouldn't buy. But if you're pursuing a house to find a home and create a home, you should absolutely consider jumping into the market. That'll be one of the best decisions you've ever made. All right, guys, so a tricky situation, but we're going to go with this for a wrap up. There's a lot of different moving components and moving parts when it comes to should we buy a house or should we not. But no matter what you do, we want you to do it from a position of strength. So hopefully this discussion has given you some ideas about what would make purchasing a home feel right for you and your family, or what would make you scared to do so and make you feel like it'd be a better time to sit back and watch the market, or to save money, or to try and strengthen your position. But all things considered, I think that home ownership is 1, an amazing path forward, 2, a great way to build wealth for your family, and 3, a great way to ensure security for the long term. So while we can't predict anyone's perfect situation, if you're in a position of strength, we would always recommend getting into a home and trying to hold that, because it can greatly increase the utility in your life. That being said, not every situation is a one-size-fits-all, so if you have specific questions or a specific situation, drop it in the comments down below. Would love to see if we could help you figure out what feels right for you guys. But outside of that, thanks again for all of your time. I am Caleb with Soukup Real Estate Services. Can't wait to get you out here to Colorado and reach out to us with any questions. Thanks, y'all.